I'm a girl from a cotton field that pulled myself above the destruction and the mistakes. And I'm here for you.
Hi Tina fans and welcome back. Tina, the documentary was a huge success in the USA and then in the UK, and now it's coming to Europe. To mark the occasion, I had the chance to ask TJ Martin and Dan Lindsay, the two directors of the movie, more about the making of the film and the relationship with Tina. The interview is 1 hour long, so there are timestamps in the description so you can jump directly to the topics that interest you. Let's go! First thing first, as I was saying to TJ, a big thank you for doing this. I know you've done a lot of interviews and I'm not sure if you have anything else to say about the documentary or Tina, and really it's a nice opportunity, at least for me, to say thank you for the work that you've done, and it's really a beautiful piece, and I'm so glad that it's gonna last for a long time for Tina fans and for the people who didn't know Tina so much. Anyway, once a star, always a threat. How did you react to the success of the documentary on HBO? Were you surprised by the ratings and the audience it brought?
I don't know. I mean, I guess in some, I don't know if it was a surprise. I'll say for me personally, it's been a unique experience in terms of our other films. This film has like kind of transcended just the normal documentary community, and like it had like, it feels like it had this like, you know, slight cultural moment in America at least, where, you know, I've been in places and heard people talking about it like next to me, or like I got my hair cut the other day and the woman cutting my hair asked what I did, and I was like, oh, I'm a documentary filmmaker. She's like, oh, I just watched the most amazing documentary on Tina Turner. And I was like, well, I was one of the people that made that. And just so that I think has been different. I don't know if that's like surprising. It's just a very unique experience for us as filmmakers, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's surprising, but it is very, it's rewarding as a filmmaker, but it's also really like heartening to know that people still love Tina so much. It's like this reminder that it kind of goes beyond the fan base, that she has had such a kind of profound effect on not just pop culture, but she's still like in people's hearts, you know, and her story is still in people's hearts. And that's been really nice to see that people, she's had such resonance in people's lives.
I had the chance to talk to Simon, and he told me that after Tina saw the documentary for the first time, they went on a Zoom meeting, on a Skype call together, and she had a big smile on her face. Can you tell us anything more about her reaction, and did you hear more since the release of the movie from Tina and Erwin?
I don't know more of that Zoom call other than what Simon said, because it was like, when she watched it, it was like 4 a.m. our time or something like that. So we were asleep. So we didn't get to join that call, but yeah, I know that, you know, we've communicated with Tina and Erwin over email and stuff since it's come out, and they're both really happy. And from what I gather, and Erwin has, you know, teased us a couple times about just different press things, and you know, just like, oh, it's so funny to see you guys popping up on the, you know, in the German newspaper or whatever. It's but yeah, I think they're really happy, and I think equally excited about how impactful the film has, or the resonance the film has had with people.
There's been a book, there's been a movie, and there's been a musical. That's what Tina, and now what? That's what Tina told you when you first saw her in Zurich. How did it went, this first meeting, and how many times did you go there?
First meeting went really well. That's as we pointed out before, that is a true story. That was the first word she said to us while we were sitting waiting to have our first meeting with her. And Dan responded by saying, well, that's why we're here, to talk to you about the same thing and how to figure out what we're doing. And I think that broke the ice a little bit, because we all kind of laughed and kind of casually started talking about, not necessarily about the film, but about that exact same thing, about kind of how her life has been on public display for so long, and what our interest might be. And that just led to, other conversations, specifically and driven by Tina, specifically talking about how the world has kind of cemented her in this specific era and time with Ike, and for her it became, or for us it became, really interesting to watch her talk about her time with Ike, because it was very palpable that she was still struggling with the trauma from that. And that was just something I don't think we were quite ready for, is to understand that even at that age, at this chapter in life, she was still kind of trying to make sense and process that facet of her past. And it fundamentally informed and shaped the direction we were going to take with the film. It got us starting to think, what is it that keeps that trauma so fresh? And it's directly tied to, or one facet of it is directly tied to this notion that there's a book, there's a movie, there's a musical. It's this reminder of what your life has been, and this notion that the public is, which Angela Bassett says in the film, the public has gained so much from aspects of her life, and specifically some of the trauma of her life, but then at the same time we're also kind of having her remind it and relive it. And so that was just something we felt, that aspect of her story hadn't really been explored, is the story of Tina, but also the story of Tina Turner. And that's kind of like when we felt that we were onto something interesting in terms of a point of view.
When did you started interviewing Tina in Zurich?
The main interview that you see in the film we did in February of 2019 over the course of several days. And then we went back there in August of 2019. Does that sound right, TJ? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And filmed around the house for a couple days, and got to spend time with her and Erwin and just kind of talk about the progress of the film. And that was actually probably the first time that I think Tina started to understand the scale and scope of what we were doing. I think, I think in some ways, when she heard documentary, she probably thought, some of the typical MTV, VH1, like TV made documentaries. And when she saw, the kind of equipment, I was sitting with her on the porch, and she was like looking at our crew out shooting the tree in the backyard. And she was like, this is like when I would do music videos. She's like, you have a really big crew. I was like, yeah, this is like a big, and then we started talking about it, coming out in theaters. And I think that was when she really understood, oh, this is a little bit different than that. So we shot then, and then we shot with her. You actually don't see this in the film, but we filmed with her in upstate New York, where she was for the days leading up to the Broadway premiere, and then filmed with her the day of the Broadway premiere as well. So all in all, I don't know how many days total we filmed with her. I guess it would be close to like, 6, 7, 8 days.
8 days, yeah, something like that. Not
spread her out through a year.
Yeah, exactly. But not including the very wonderful opportunities you had to have dinner with her, which was unexpected and very delightful.
Yeah.
I guess it is. And it was really a beautiful idea to film Tina's house, which I think we've never seen the inside so much on video, and really put it at the end of the movie, like a heaven of peace after the war, where she can rest. And it's beautiful. Were there boundaries about places you couldn't film?
Yeah, not really. Yeah, she was pretty open. I love that that's your takeaway from that scene, because we did for a while talk about what home meant to her, because it's there's a subtle theme of home and searching for home in the film. And she did talk a lot about how that particular property is a sanctuary of sorts. She's very much at peace in that home and in that garden. And so it was always kind of in the edit, we had these moments where she really expanded upon kind of like her philosophies on death and how much this particular place is magical to her. And then we just couldn't figure out a way to fit it in the film. But I felt like if we did our jobs right, by the time you arrive to her house and you see it for the first time, and you've heard the love story and you've heard her kind of trying to come to peace with her past, we were hoping that those visuals alone could give you that sense of how meaningful that property is to her now, and that place is to her.
You did that beautifully. I love the garage. Where was Tina's interviews recorded? That's not home.
It's a I guess a castle in Zurich. This is like very grand residence that was built, I don't know when, but by like a beer maker. I don't know what you call that. And the family had built this large house up on this hill overlooking Zurich, and but it's used now as a space. I mean, I think somebody actually resides maybe in I can't remember, but it's a large space, and it gets used as a gallery sometimes and other things. And it had the same feel as Tina's house. We just didn't want to disrupt her, because we had set up so much stuff and like pre-light, and it just was easier to do it in another location.
Tina's husband is credited as executive producer on the movie, and really he's Tina's firewall. He's very protective of Tina. What was his involvement in the movie?
Everything was set up before we came on to direct. And I mean, in terms of process with the film, we were really fortunate in that his involvement was really to help us pursue the things that we were interested in, to help us pursue our vision for the piece itself. So, they gave us a ton of autonomy. They really didn't watch that many cuts. He didn't watch that many cuts. And he was instrumental in, when we needed someone like Oprah to get back to us in terms of scheduling, they could reach out to Oprah because they're not going to respond to TJ and Dan. So he ended up being much more of a resource in terms of also, when there's kind of fact checking and you have, there's various accounts, point of views of certain aspects of the story, if we need some fact checking, and also instrumental in just kind of getting some of the talent on board to commit to the film.
You based the documentary on this people interview from '92. I went on eBay to search for one. After I saw the documentary, you never know. How did you come across it?
Well, that came out relatively early on. I think it was after we had already met Tina the first time, and I think, like TJ was saying, we kind of started to circle around this idea of like the story of the story. Like, how did this public perception of Tina come about? And I think we had just assumed that Tina was the kind of initial thing where she really, and then I don't know who it was. We just kind of like realized, like, wait a second, there's interviews earlier. Like, now I hadn't even thought about this until now. It was talking to Terry Britton and him saying that at the Grammys, everyone was chanting Tina, like everybody was rooting for her. And he said, because, everybody knew the story. And I think that was like the thing that clicked in our mind of like, wait a second, Tina came out after that. So then we started looking and we found interviews like in Rolling Stone where some of that stuff was mentioned. And then it was just a quest to like, okay, well, where did this actually start? And that People magazine was, after doing some searching online and stuff, that was the earliest full mention of that story that we could find. And then we actually confirmed that with Roger and Tina when we did the interview. And that, I mean, we show that, truthfully, that's the first time that story came out, but it was a part of, like there's a 2020 episode, I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, that came out like 3 months later or 4 months later. And like, then there were various articles, but it was like, the Carl had the kind of exclusive, like, we'll do this big long profile. And so anyways, that was just through research and finding it. And it's just funny, as we do more and more interviews now, a lot of journalists like go, well, we all know that it, like, she first came public, and people, I was like, no, I don't think everybody knew that. Like that was hard for us to find out, actually. Yeah.
I mean, I have a huge collection of Tina, and I think no one knew about it. What you did was great.
It's just I think it's like, as I've thought about it, I wonder how much of it is that in the film, because we're kind of like progressing through the story, we present it as like she did this interview, and then like things started to kind of really move for her in her solo career. So I don't know if like press are like seeing that and being like, of course we all knew that. I don't know. It's just very funny that we've had several times people have been like, we all know that she first spoke in People magazine. I was like, I don't know. We didn't all know that.
Did Tina really remember that interview?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. I mean, we talked about it in our interview with her. I mean, she remembered that and the 2020 thing, and we spoke with her at length about the motivations to do that, and then the motivations to write I, Tina, and the movie, and because that was something, not to go on too big of a tangent, but that was something that TJ and I were struggling with as filmmakers. It was still that question, like inherent in there's been a musical, there's been a book, there's been all these things, like why are we doing this? And we were we were kind of asking her, like, why do you want to make this film? And so that was in our interview with her. We wanted to get into the motivations to tell for all the motivations to tell her story in all these different mediums.
And the luck that you got with this interview were the tapes from Chateau Algonquin and the Kurt Loder tapes, because I don't think you could get Tina that genuine or with such a language. The 81-year-old Tina would never speak like that.
I mean, we got to give a little credit to Ben Piner, our co-producer and archivist. I mean, I think it was Dan actually who first after reading I, Tina, the structure of the film is built out of kind of these almost like these first-person narratives, these first-person anecdotes.
The structure of the book.
The structure of the book. Yeah. And I think Dan was like, well, this is kind of more of an oral history. There must be, it's almost like Kurt was transcribing from interviews, so there must be possibly some tapes. And that's when we started kind of digging and realized, sure enough, there were tapes, but Kurt didn't have them all consolidated in his house. Some of them were lent to another production, some were at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so it took a little bit of digging and collecting this material. And to your point, it ends up being kind of the more rich, intimate insights into Tina at a time in her life that I don't know if we could have gotten, her to kind of reflect the same way she is, now, the same way she is in that moment in the 80s. And then same with Carl. I think when we discovered that we discovered the People magazine was actually truly the first time she shared her story. I think it was more like fingers crossed there are tapes. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, Ben reached out to him was trying to track him down. Yeah. Couldn't find any digital communication with him, but found his address and wrote him a handwritten letter to say that we're making this film and to see if he had any tapes and if he was interested in participating. And sure enough, he got back to him. And we were really fortunate that he too held on to all of his tapes, which fundamentally changes the kind of the feel and the dynamics and the intimacy of the film.
The archive work on the movie is incredible, and I talked to Ben Piner, who was co-producer and lead archivist on the movie, and he told me that sometimes it was a bit nightmarish Could you tell us a bit more about this archives research?
Oh, we should have brought Ben along for this. He could have, yeah. I mean, it's our film before this. LA '92 was a film that was made completely out of archival materials. So, you know, we had some experience with it, and it is a bit of a. You're almost like a detective. You're trying, you know, you're piecing clues together as to where things might be. You know, you read one thing and somebody will mention something, and that can lead you to somebody, and then you ask, you know, with the fingers crossed that, you know, maybe somebody has things. I will say the biggest, in terms of archive, beyond the tapes, I would say the biggest thing was Rhonda. And Rhonda, you know, we were able to develop a really great relationship with her, and you know, and she had an amazing amount of photos and videos, and she really was the keeper of all things Tina. But you know, that wasn't like we just, you know, even with Irwin and Tina making the introduction to Rhonda, it's not like she was just like, okay, here's everything. Like, it was a process of talking to her, and I think she had been, you know, she'd had experiences in the past with other productions where people didn't handle her materials well, and so I think she kind of had gotten to a point where she's just like, I'm not going to give anything to anybody. So yeah, that was a process, and it you know, it was. It ultimately was really great because you know, we got to develop a really great relationship with Rhonda, and really get to know her, and it happened that she lived not far from me, and so yeah, I mean, but I would credit her so much with a lot, you know, a lot of the unique things that are in there.
I'm gonna get crucified by the fans if I don't ask more about Rhonda's material. Could you explain how the photos albums were organized?
You know, Rhonda was sick when we signed on to do the film. She had just gone through. Let me think how much to share here. She had gone through. I mean, everybody knew this. She had gone through chemotherapy, and she was still kind of recovering from that. And so she just didn't have the strength to have us come over, or, you know, she was still going through treatments and stuff. So we corresponded with her for many months just over email, and you know, Irwin had said, Rhonda's got a lot of photos, you should talk to her about it. And Rhonda always played off what she had as just being a few snapshots that she didn't think would be too helpful for us. And so she had reached out and said, you know, I'm feeling up for you and TJ coming by the house. So we went over and we spent an afternoon with her, and so then we got to the point of talking about the photos, and she said, well, I pulled out some of the stuff that I have. You guys can look at it, but I don't think it's going to be too helpful for you. And we're like, okay. And she walks over and or I guess we went and got them because she couldn't carry them over. This stack of albums, and each one is like 1964, 1965. 1966, every year, and they're just like incredible archives of especially those kind of early Ike and Tina years, all the way through Tina going solo, and just, you know, at a certain point, Rhonda started shooting slide film, so there was a ton of like slide film that she went through and kind of pulled out stuff for us, and a lot of those are in the film. But we never got the opportunity to see all the thousands and thousands of slides that she has. So we, you know, created a system with her where we would pick up the one album at a time and bring it to our office and scan it, and you know, we were very protective of it and handled everything very like cautiously, and it's debatable whether, I mean, we did our interview with her in August, I think, of 2019, and we did that over the course of a couple of days, and she showed up to the interview with these Super 8 reels, and she's like, I don't know, maybe you guys would be interested in this. And we're all TJ and I and Ben are like, well, of course we're interested in this. And so we had those things scanned, and that's where those early performances that you see that have kind of the Ready Steady Go video, which, as I understand it, the Ready Steady Go performance from Ike and Tina has been lost, the actual show, and this is the only visual of their actual performance. And I don't know what else she had in storage. What happened was some of it got damaged when she was in I can't even remember the details, but at one point some of that stuff got damaged and moved around when she was out of the country. But yeah, she would kind of as the process, things we get later and later in the production, she'd be like, oh, I just came upon this. And you'd be like, Rhonda, you didn't just come upon that. And I think I joked with her one time. I was like, you didn't just find that. And she's like, well, maybe not. But yeah, so, we saw a bit of what her archive was, but I don't even think we saw nearly everything.
Do you know what happened to it?
Since she's passed away? I don't. I think
the family is. I think her sister is kind of taking over Rhonda's estate, and I think in an ideal world, at some point, it'd be lovely to figure out a way to put her work and her own legacy and Tina's legacy on display. But that's at the end of the day, it is very much for the family to decide, and maybe we can have that conversation later, but I believe her sister's in control of this state.
And part of what our agreement with her too was that we went through the process of copywriting all her photos for her. Yeah. So we did the scanning, and then we're able to log all the things, and all those things got registered in the copyright office, because that was something she was, I think, had kind of been, some of her photos had leaked out, and people were selling them and stuff like that. So, but now those are all copyrighted.
The really interesting footage from the documentary, and I loved the way they were exposed with Craig's stories when he's talking about the violence, and you showed old footage from Ike and Tina's house that was still as it was when they were living there. But can you tell us how you came across this footage?
Yeah, well, there's there's stuff that was shot by Bob Gruen, who followed Ike and Tina in the 70s. And that's kind of the black and white, that was shot on early video, Portapack stuff. And he was actually one of the first people we spoke with in terms of having access to his archive. So we, that was real material shot in real time that we then intercut with this other material that I think you're talking about, of the house when it's desolate and there's no one inside of it. It actually was we were really fortunate to find that stuff, because it matched with the style that we were going to shoot the film, which is kind of, for material that we didn't have, can we shoot these old spaces where really historic events took place? And while we were early in the process, Jonathan Shin, one of our producers, had caught wind about a filmmaker who was deeply fascinated by Tina, had always wanted to make a film about her, and he got the opportunity to go film in their home, Ike and Tina's home, that's featured in the film, before it got demolished. What he learned was Ike sold the house to a dentist who kept the house as is, decorated the same way that Ike and Tina had it decorated, because he loved them so much. And I believe that the dentist then since passed, and the house got, purchased and was going to get demolished. And he was able to squeeze in 3 days of shooting before it got demoed. And he went and filmed kind of just the same way we were going to film the rest of our film, which is kind of navigating these spaces and kind of capturing a feel of what happened in these locations. And so we were able to, we saw that material early on, and we were like, yes, absolutely, we'd love to see this or use this. And we were able to negotiate a deal with him to incorporate it into the film. And it's, you know, in the way it's used, it is kind of going back and forth between that and Bob Gruen stuff that was actually where they, you know, featuring the kids and where they were raised and all of that. So it was really kind of serendipitous.
It fits perfectly in the movie, and in addition with that, the score that you put on the film, and rather than using Tina or Ike and Tina songs, you went for a more classical score composed by Danny Benzi and Sonda Jorians. I'm sorry if I pronounce it badly. Could you tell us more about their work, how they approach the movie? Because the soundtrack is just beautiful.
They scored our last film, and we just love both of those guys on a personal level, and they're great to work with, and they're immensely talented. And as we started to kind of find the identity of the score, we knew from the beginning we wanted to have a score and not just rely on what we'd call like needle drops. But it took us a while to kind of, you know, we experimented with different temp tracks to just try to find an identity. And eventually when we did, it felt like Danny and Sonder would be the right people to achieve that. So we gave them our references, and then they kind of took it to the place that they do. And, you know, in early conversations, they talked about this idea of like, could we create a score and limit the instruments so that I know Danny often talked about like it's only 4 people in a room, and they have a piano and strings and a clarinet, and it's always these individual instruments that eventually grows and grows, so that by the end, when Tina is coming into the premiere on Broadway, it's actually a full orchestra. And so that was kind of their conceptual idea of like that things would build, you know, and have more pieces as it went along. But I think, I don't know, TJ, and as we found that like identity of it, it was partly about like leaning into the elegance of Tina. And that was something we talked about from very early on. Like, Tina's a very elegant person, and so we wanted the interviews to reflect that, and any of the aesthetics of, you know, that we were creating. And that's kind of, don't you think that's kind of where the beginning of that score kind of came from?
Yeah, we pulled inspiration. We leaned in on Tina. We pulled inspiration from her, kind of how classy she is and how sophisticated she is. And, you know, to Dan's earlier point, knowing that this should be a movie first. It's about storytelling, and then at the center of it, we should be as well as celebrating her music. So, but it's a film first, and then we celebrate her music, versus kind of just using it as a vehicle just to showcase the music. And so once we kind of start recognizing that the film itself is navigating triumph and trauma, and it's just these kind of, she lived such a life of extremes, that also kind of informed how the score would kind of vacillate between dark spaces and lighter, more beautiful spaces, and kind of let Tina's essence and also Tina's story really drive and dictate what the mood and the feel of the pieces were going to be.
We also too, just kind of naturally, like as the edit was coming along, we started to kind of find this language of like going from presentational performance moments and into this kind of like score, which was like always kind of like the ability to get into the more intimate thoughts of Tina from, you know, and have this like subtle juxtaposition between the public facing and the kind of private. And that's, I think we had so many versions of the opening. I think TJ cut like 50 different versions of the opening or something like that. And 65. And and it was very late in the process of the edit that TJ came upon the Ask Me How I Feel performance from Amsterdam.
Barcelona.
Yeah, or it's Barcelona? Yeah, right, Barcelona. And we just loved the energy of that and the message of that and how it related thematically to the film. But it was like, well, we don't want to just have a performance because that seems like very predictable. And then the thought is just like, oh, could we basically take a message from the film and say, let's have that kind of morph into this kind of more, intimate world, right? So the performance and the visuals start to kind of bleed on top of each other, and we get into Tina's internal voice in a way. And that was kind of the way to say, okay, that's what this film is. It's both the public-facing performer, strong Tina, and the internal thoughts and the kind of more intimate thoughts and feelings and ideas of Tina.
TJ, is there a one version of the opening that maybe you remember better than the other, and you thought, oh, maybe that could have worked or something?
Yeah, there's millions of them. I think honestly, I don't think it was. I think when you're cutting different versions of scenes, you always fall in love with something, but it doesn't quite fit the greater intent of the film. So, we always operate the sum is bigger than the parts. So it all has to be cohesive. I think in this particular case, it's by far the best version of the film because of what Dan explained. It says everything you need to know about what you're going to watch through the filmmaking. This big performance that just slowly goes into this soft piano inside of Tina's POV while she's literally telling the audience, this is what you think the story is, but I haven't lived that good of a life. It's been really hard for me, essentially. And then the film opens up from there. And even in that first 60 seconds, it's big, anthemic energy, and then to small, intimate, and that's pensive kind of tone, and that's really dictates like the basic essence of how the film is going to be, the spaces the film is going to navigate. But yeah, it's we tried a variety of things. I mean, early iterations were we leaned in on to your first question, right? There's been a book, there's been a musical, there's been all these different elements. Early iterations were, well, let's just use those different elements and sit and kind of create a little bit more of a space that's more meta. It's exploring Tina's life through these different mediums early on, right? So you see her being embodied by Angela Bassett early, knowing that maybe we can just drop into scenes throughout the course of the film that's just what's love got to do with it, that's helping kind of drive the film along. But it just kind of got really confusing really fast. There's too many things happening at once.
Too many Tinas.
Yeah, this ended up being, I think, probably the best version, and it took getting through those 65 iterations to find it.
I saw Tina many times in big stadiums, and I went to Nutbush a couple of times. And when you go to Nutbush, you realize how difficult the journey was, or how incredible the journey was, from the middle of nowhere to a Swiss castle in Switzerland. What did you feel when you went to Nutbush?
Well, funny enough, we didn't actually end up getting to go there because of COVID. So, I mean, we'd been to that area before. So we know the rural Tennessee and the outskirts of Memphis really well. But for filming in the documentary, because of travel restrictions, just our DP went to Nutbush, and then we spoke with her, and she was like FaceTiming with us, and we're like, okay, let's get that. And but yeah, we weren't able to go. But I'm going to. I've never visited the museum on our own, but we know that area very, very well because we made a film in Memphis and spent time in all around there.
Yeah, COVID affected a lot of this film near the back end. We never, traditionally, you get to a place where the film feels like it's working, you screen with an audience. And so you can kind of see your blind spots. You can kind of see, oh, like I never saw that before. And it's a pretty fundamental part of the process, at least for us. And we've never screened this film with an audience. And to this day, we've never seen it with an audience, which is a first for us. We were in quarantine. We had to give it out. We finished and we delivered. And then just now the world is starting to open back up, and we've never seen it in a theater. We've never seen it sitting down with an audience. It's just been kind of us and, and colleagues in the same room.
My friends went to see it at the cinema, open air cinema in Berlin last week, and or 2 weeks ago, was it? Mm-hmm. And really nice. So if I go on tina.film, I will see where it's broadcast in theaters around the world, right?
Universal is releasing it around the world, and I think it's going territory by territory, and I wish I could say exactly where it is right now. Right. But I mean, luckily, everywhere else in the world it will be, and slowly in different places. But United States, it won't have the theatrical release that we had hoped it would have, yeah, I mean, fingers crossed we're going to be able to make it overseas for a few screenings, and eventually maybe one day see this movie in a theater, because we still have never seen it the way it was supposed to be seen.
The movie mostly focuses on Tina's private life, and there's been a concerns among Tina's fans that this would be the case, and of course we know the story by heart. And do you think that maybe there should be another documentary that could focus on Tina's professional life and career?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, I think number one, I'd be the first one to watch it. We've said in a lot of interviews that Tina's life and career is so vast that you really need many hours to do it properly. And us as filmmakers, we are always more drawn to the kind of human and intimate aspect of stories, and we don't come to documentaries like some documentary filmmakers come from a kind of point of view of journalism, where it's more about and research and all of these things. And so it's just not our natural inclination to do an examination, I guess, so to speak. And so, we're always looking for human stories. I think the one thing, though, that I will say that was interesting in the process of making this is there is an assumption, I think, that everyone knows Tina's story. And I think, the thing, especially with the success of the film, is there's an entire generation that have no idea. They just know Tina as a kind of iconic figure. They don't really know anything about her, and it's been interesting to see that their response to the film. I think that was a challenge we had as filmmakers. Was you have a portion of the audience that knows the story, and then a portion that doesn't, and you gotta service both. You need to give that backstory of where she came from for the uninitiated, so that you understand the triumph that she actually had. I think our goal was to do that through Tina's point of view, though, as opposed to
like experts or something like that.
Yeah. It felt like, okay, yes, Tina has told her story in books and in other ways, but nobody's really, it's one thing to like read something, and it's another to hear Tina actually say it. And I think we just ultimately decided like that was the thing that was most powerful to us. But trust me, we had it in the back of our heads all the time, like, oh man, there's like this whole other aspect of her that we, like a examination of what she meant even culturally to music, right? And like how who she has influenced and all of these things. But I just, as filmmakers, we're not necessarily drawn to those types of films. Is that fair, TJ, to say? I mean,
totally. I was just gonna say that there's just that's 100%. I think it's also just like, once you hear the pain in Tina's voice when she's talking about the struggles with her mom and the struggles with not feeling loved, that's, you can't beat that. That is fundamentally what the vehicle of filmmaking is all about, is to be able to create a conduit for empathy. And I'm gonna always have, I think Dan and I are always gonna have deeper resonance with someone being vulnerable on camera or on tape or whatever it is, versus kind of like, yeah, let me tell you about the making of this hit, this hit, this hit, this hit. It's like kind of like, that doesn't necessarily need to be in the context of the film. Having said that, is there value and merit in having a series that really kind of dives into the accomplishments of the music specifically? Absolutely. I don't know if we're the ones to make it.
And you got to get Terry to sit down and actually.
And you got to get Terry.
Which was maybe the hardest interview to.
Terry's very shy. He's very shy.
Terry's very shy. Yeah, he is the sweetest, nicest, most gentle man I've ever met, and he was very gracious. And I will say also, he very much went out of his comfort zone to help us to do that interview. And I know he has never seen the film, and I know he never will, because he doesn't want to see himself. But we are very, very appreciative that he took the time that he did to do the interview.
That part
And by the way, gave us that footage from the studio that nobody had ever seen before.
This moment is so nice when he's explaining to Tina how to sing What's Love, and he says, it's a jug, and you got it, and then it explodes. So well done. The central aspect of Tina's life is like love, or maybe the absence of love. And I think only the relationship that she had with her mother could have destroyed anyone. And I think the Ike story is just the tip of the iceberg. What do you think? What is for you the most impactful thing that you would take away from Tina's life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the process of making the film, at least for me, the most impactful is this notion that she's still processing the trauma, speaking about it now, it should not have been a surprise to us, but in the moment, it was just something that fundamentally shook us to our core, and that's why we took the approach we took in making the film. To your point, for the longest time, we thought of the film a little bit more about navigating PTSD, post-traumatic stress, and processing your trauma and making the choice to be a survivor every day. And it was closer to the end that we realized, it's her life in the film itself is kind of cloaked in trauma, but it's exactly what you said. It's actually a pursuit of love, and the journey you actually go on is a pursuit of romantic love, of familial love, of love of your own story, like actually her coming to peace with her own narrative, which is a form of self-love, which totally reshaped our thinking of her and our appreciation for her and her story and her narrative. So I think to answer your question, in the process of making the film, I think I was still most affected by trying to understand her processing trauma that, and things she went through, that happened to her years ago, in like fundamental stages of her life. In retrospect now, if I think about the film and my own experience with it, I've just grown a tremendous amount of appreciation for someone who fights for life. She's such a fighter. And that's like, no wonder so many people have such an intimate association with her and glean so much energy from her, because she doesn't, as difficult as the times have been for her, she sees she's got a fight and a will to live, to create a healthy version of life for herself, and that's just deeply admirable.
I think the thing that I was struck by in meeting Tina and talking to her, and then really doing the deep dive into her life is kind of what we ended up exploring in the film. And it's the irony of like this person that has the ability to move forward, but yet so much of her identity is based on the past. And like that, that's just a kind of fascinating thing. But in terms of like what I've gleaned for myself by kind of spending so much time with her narrative is that power of the ability to move forward, right? And I think TJ's pointed this out in the past, that Tina's ability to kind of create a vision for what she wants, even though she is often in her life was often in situations where the circumstances she was living in would tell her that she couldn't do the thing that she wanted to do, and her like desire and will to just do it is really incredible. In getting to know her a little bit and be with her and talk to her and stuff, you can feel that energy, that like there is a desire to like, she's very, this is always such a cheesy kind of thing, but she is very present and very like grounded. And I think that that's something I take away of like this ability to like, oh yeah, like you can, it is possible to kind of visualize the thing that you want and then put yourself in a position to do it. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen for everyone. It's just that it's possible, and yeah, I find her life to be, it's so exceptional. And yeah, I mean, the big thing I take away is I wish I would have seen her live when I had the chance, because I never saw her in concert, and I wish I would have.
You won an Oscar for Undefeated, an Academy Award for Undefeated, Emmys for LA 92. Any award chance for Tina?
I don't know if we're in control of that.
Yeah. Those things are always hard to tell. I mean, it's definitely like, in America, at least it's made, an impression, and it's in a kind of big, wide conversation, but those things are, you don't know. So, I mean, it would be, the reason that stuff is nice is it just brings more attention to the film, and hopefully it gets more people to watch it. And so, yeah, I mean, that would be our hope, is if it does get more attention down the line with awards, it just helps hopefully extend the life of the film, right? And have more and more people want to see it.
I mean, HBO is there's talk of being proactive and during award season, but in terms of results, who knows?
Well, they're very good at sending nice boxes to influencers.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for mine.
Oh man! Hey, I am too.
Oh.
I still don't even have a Tina sweatshirt.
What?
I had to give up my one that I got to my wife.
Guys, congratulations again on the beautiful, beautiful documentary. We all love it, and I wish you good luck for your future project. And thank you for the time to talking to me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Where did you get? I got to see that full T-shirt, and I got to get one. Yeah.
In a museum in Nutbush.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that.
Any Tina t-shirts. Well, this one is pretty nice. It's not too cheesy. It's all right.
Yeah, no, I'll have to look that up.
All right.
All right, Ben, appreciate it. And by the way, I just want to throw the thanks right back at you. We really, I know we didn't get to talk while we were doing it, but we were very aware of, not only using your site as a reference to help us with certain things, but I know all the help you gave with Ben and sending the videos and stuff that you had, especially in things where we were able to see them and then try to track down like, you know, a master copy and stuff like that. So that stuff is like absolutely invaluable for us. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
I wish my collection was a bit more well organized, but I'm glad Ben got in touch with me and I could help.
Yeah.
A small way.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you guys. Have a nice day.
Thanks so
All right,
much.
you too.
Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed the interview. Tina, the documentary, is already available on Blu-ray and DVD in the USA and the UK, and will soon be available everywhere in Europe. And if you want to know if the movie is showing in a theater near you, just head to tina.film, enter your location, and you will see if the movie is playing near you. Stay safe, Tina fans, and see you soon.